Diana, you will let me know when you want to change the slide, yeah?
Okay, sure. Thank you.
You
You can go on the next slide with the title.
One moment. There you go.
Okay, so good day everyone. My name is Marina Diana Agafite. I am a PhD student within Bucharest University of Economic Studies. And for this session, I am delighted to present you the study titled Uncovering the Invisible Workforce, Labor Input Method Applied to Romania's Informal Employment. This is a collaborative work together with my PhD supervisor, Adriana Davidescu, and Tamara Nai. Next. I will briefly begin with the background and the relevance of this study. Informal employment is a phenomenon which shapes the functioning of labor markets worldwide, but its relevance is particularly important in transition and emerging European economies. In Romania, and not only, the informal employment represents a survival option during some economic downturns. However, it has important negative impacts, which can be grouped into three main pillars, let's say, namely the sustainability of tax revenues, the coverage and fairness of social protection, and the capacity for inclusive economic growth. In this context, understanding how hidden labor evolves across long periods is essential in order to design credible policy formulations. This is particularly important in settings like in Romania, where labor market has been shaped by multiple structural reforms, demographic changes, and technological disruptions. Next. Why this focus on Romania? Not only because all the authors are Romanians, but also because Romania is an interesting case study for this phenomenon. After exiting the communist era in 1989, Romania has experienced a rapid market liberalization, which was not matched by equally rapid institutional consolidation. This left important institutional blind spots that allow for informality to remain structurally embedded. We also have extensive rural populations, regions dominated by agricultural sectors and other sectors that are not well regulated, limited administrative and inspection capacity, and significant differences between different regions in terms of enforcement. Because of that, Romania's informality is not just episodic, but it is embedded in long-term transitions. Next. If we take a look within the literature, taking into account that this phenomenon persists for a very long period of time and it is a complex phenomenon, it has been studied from multiple perspectives. First, we can mention the conceptual and institutional foundations, which shows that informality is deeply rooted in weak institution environments. And different authors highlighted that when rules are unpredictable and information is inconsistent, then informal employment tend to persist as a coping mechanism. After that, the literature emphasizes the role of fiscal and regulatory determinants. High compliance costs, together with rigid taxation and administrative burdens, push both firms and individuals to work outside the formal system. More than that, the socio-cultural behavioral factors also play a crucial role. In societies where informal norms are widely tolerated, informal patterns such as envelope wages or self-employment are seen as acceptable or even necessary in some contexts. Next, the literature specific to the Central and Eastern European countries indicates that informality here is rather structural than cyclical, and it correlates with governance weakness, transition legacies, and rural employment structures, and also persistent inequalities. One important method that has been used in order to determine the magnitude of the informal employment is the labor input method, which estimates the hidden labor by comparing the actual labor input with a hypothetical benchmark derived from participation behavior. This is quite a transparent and straightforward method, and because of that has been used by different EU institutions in order to penalize different national accounts indicators. And finally, the literature at the level of Romania confirms that Romania has one of the highest levels of informal employment in Europe. Now, regarding the research gap, there are multiple studies analyzing this phenomenon at the level of Romania. However, most of the studies analyze the determinants of informal employment, and they use specifically mimic and the currency demand approach. And there is scarce evidence using consistent quarterly data over 2 decades and limited applications of this method, the labor input method. In terms of the research motivation, we first aim to understand how informality behaves over a quite long period of time and across major economic phases. And secondly, we want to provide a transparent and replicable tool based on harmonized Eurostat data, which can be updated regularly and integrated into labor market monitoring frameworks. Next. If we change our focus to the research objectives, we have two central objectives, namely to operationalize the labor input method in Romania between 2000 and 2024 using quarterly data. For that, we have to identify the baseline for the zero informality using the participation rate. And after that, to trace the evolution of informal employment across structural phases and producing estimates the share of total employment in order to be easier to interpret the results. Next. Regarding the data that we have used, we rely mainly on the labor force survey provided by Eurostat, and we have used data from 2000 and 2024 to cover a wide period of time. And in terms of the indicators that we have used, we can mention the total population, the active population, employed population, unemployed, and the activity rates, all of them taken from the Eurostat. Next. Regarding the methodology, as I have already mentioned, we have used the labor input method, which is based on the assumption that if no informality exists, then the activity rates would remain quite stable over time. If we observe any deviation from a benchmark activity rate, that could be interpreted as an evidence of hidden or undeclared labor. In order to conduct this and to apply this method, we have to follow some steps. The first step would be to compute the hypothetical active population by assuming a constant activity rate of 65.2. This value of 65.2 is the maximum activity rate registered. In the case of Romania, this value was registered in the third quarter of the year 2000. In the next step, we retrieve the actual active population from Eurostat data, which consists of the employed population and unemployed population. And finally, in the third step, we compute this difference between the hypothetical active population computed in step 1, where we don't assume any informal workers, and the active population that was determined in step number 2. And in order for the results to be easier to understand and to interpret, we report this number to the total employment in order to have some shares there. Next, Edward. And we begin with an overview of the findings. Informal employment in Romania follows a three-phase trajectory. Each of them is linked with a major economic and institutional shift. If we take a very brief look, we can see an increase in high levels in the beginning of 2000, and after that, moderate decline. The informal employment remains quite stable over time until the recent years when we witness an increase. Next. If we take all these phases one by one, the first phase would be at the beginning of the period until 2005 or 2006. This period is quite close after exiting the communist era, so there has been an industrial reconstructing, privatizations, and downsizing of state enterprises in Romania. Many workers re-entered the labor market informally, generating a sharp rise in the undeclared employment, peaking at 23% in the first quarter of 2003. In the next phase, next slide, Eduard. The next slide would be somewhere between 2006 and 2019. First, it's worth mentioning that at the beginning of the period, Romania accessed to European Union. So during this period, there has been some efforts to have stronger institutions. There has been greater economic stability and growing service sectors, which contributed to a moderate reduction in informality. The informal share stabilized between 15 to 20%. So even there have been better conditions, the informal employment was not eliminated at all, but it has been reduced to some point. And finally, we can mention the last phase, next slide, which consists from the most recent periods, from 2020 to 2024, where we can see a sharp increase in the share of informal employment. We can correlate that with the COVID-19 pandemic, also with the energy crisis, and also with the unprecedented levels of inflation, which determined numerous people to choose to work informal rather than formal. And in this way, the percentage of informal employment is close to 30% in 2021. Next, as a brief overview of the results, the evidence suggests that informality in Romania is not merely reactive, but systematically embedded within our economy. During downturns, workers transition into informal activities as a survival strategy, not only as a simple choice. And during periods of expansions, formal institutions and enforcement mechanisms are insufficiently robust to fully pull them back into the official sector. And next, we can mention some policy implications based on these results, of course. The first and maybe the most important one would be strengthening the institutions, enhancing labor inspection and coordination to detect and reduce undeclared work. Here also, if the institutions are perceived as being better and people trust in institutions, they concept that as having more options to work formally rather than informal. After that, we can mention encouraging formalization by reducing compliance costs and providing incentives for micro enterprises and vulnerable groups to formalize. So in this way, we can reduce the inequalities. And not least, adapting to new work forms, integrating modern work modalities into formal systems through updated legislation and portable benefits, because during the last year, especially after the pandemics, there are those what are called platform-based jobs, which are not fully regulated. And in terms of limitations and future research directions, next slide, Edward. In terms of limitations, we can mention that this method of labor input method relies heavily on benchmark selection, on that maximum of activity rate, and assume stability in participation rates, which may evolve due to demographics or education. In terms of future research, we would analyze that also in relation with another method, for instance, the labor discrepancy models, and to compare the results. And also this method could be applied on regional data and sectorial data in order to get a more comprehensive view of this phenomenon at the level of Romania. I think this was all from my side. If there are questions or suggestions, I'm here, and I think also Professor Diana has joined us.
Okay, thank you, Diana.
Thank you too.
Go on with the next presentation at the end, making some question if any has any question. The next is by Miranda Correa, Eduardo Onza, Silvana Galeano, Jessica Plaza, and Agustin Silva. The digitalization and informality, a new occupational frontier in the middle income economies, a study on working condition and job satisfaction. Miranda, are you there? No? It's not Miranda or Eduardo or Silvana, Jessica, Agustín. Juan Ignacio, are you going to talk? Yeah. The microphone.
Sí, hay una versión nueva del programa. Porque yo en el programa nosotros estábamos nuestra ponencia.
You jump a block. This block, Santos, this block was from 9:15 to 11.
Excuse me. Sorry. Thank you, Roberto. Sorry. I'm sorry, Diana. This is not your time in this position. Okay. Sorry, it's tomorrow.
No,
Well,
it's 2 hours later, but probably Santos, we can follow with the presentations, the 4 presentations that is at the block 2, and link to Diana presentation to have a block and to ask about the 5 papers.
Yeah, it's the same, but the problem is, okay, follow with the second session around informal economy and sustainable development, okay? Sorry, Diana, for my confusion.
No problem at all.
Then, Eduardo?
Yeah.
Eduardo?
So, can you see the screen?
No, we cannot see it.
You cannot see it. What about now?
Yes, it's fine.
Perfect. Okay, so this next paper, it's called Shadow Economy and Sustainable Development, a multi-varied perspective using SDG indicators. And I want to thank you also to Professor Roberto Milano and to Jair that they are also here. So some of the authors are here, the other ones are online, meaning that Professor Adriana Davidescu and Christina, my colleague Christina, which you are part from University of Economic Studies, are joined us online. And I also want to gratitude to the fact that we kind of have a history with University of Salerno, since Professor Adriana Davidescu started her postdoctoral studies with Professor Delano, and since then we have this continuous collaboration in terms of research and the other stuff. So let me start with the presentation. So the motivation for this study was actually the fact that shadow economy is a persistent global challenge. And worldwide, there are about 2 billion people that are informal. And also SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, basically provide one of the most comprehensive development frameworks that include pillars such as economic, social, environmental, governance, and all basically everything that you can think of. The gap, basically, we think that the gap is related to the progress on SDGs is not equal to automatic reduction in informality, meaning that we can have a dual perspective. On one side, the informality can increase the sustainable development. On the other side, the informality can decrease the sustainable development. And this is the thing that we wanted to basically study with this research. So in terms of research gap, in the existing literature, we have a lot of papers around taxation, regulation, income effects with authors, well-known authors such as Professor Schneider from Austria. We have behavior and structural aspects. And here we can mention, of course, Professor Delano and Williams with Horoznik. We also have governance and tax morality, and here we have to mention Torgler. But what is missing right now is the fact that there is no analysis of the relationship between all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the relation with the shadow economy. So one thing that is very important to highlight is the fact that SDGs are highly correlated. So there is a lot of multicollinearity between these SDGs. So the standard regressions won't work on this type of data. So this is the thing that we tried to address, the research questions. So we have 4 research questions. The first one was, how does progress toward each SDG relate to the shadow economic side? Then, do the SDG group into latent structural cluster shaping informality? And this question was addressed using the principal component. Then the second one, does SDG 8, the one that is related to the decent work, remain the central one's SDG system complexity that is accounted for? Then the fourth question was, how do governance and institutional quality, and here we talk about the SDG 16, influence all the other SDGs relationship with formality? So basically, our purpose was to build the first integrated SDG informality framework using PCR, principal component regression. So in terms of objectives, we have 3 objectives: to extract the latent development dimensions from SDGs, to quantify the SDG cluster relationship with shadow economy, to identify structural role of SDG 8 and SDG 16 in formalization dynamics. Then, in terms of hypotheses, we tested that SDG progress has no significant association with the size of the shadow economy, and in the alternatives hypothesis, we have claimed that advancements in SDG 8, 10, and 16 are associated with reductions in informality. Okay. In terms of data and the structure, we have used a data set comprising 150 countries. So it's a worldwide data set. It's a panel one, a balanced cross-country data set. In terms of dependent variable, we have the shadow economy expressed as percentage of the GDP that was sourced from the latest paper of Professor Blano that estimates the size of the shadow economy, which was in the paper, the estimation was based on mimic model. And the variable captures the undeclared legal production and reported income. And in terms of predictors, we have used the United Nations SDG global database, where we have the 17 SDG indicators. From a methodological perspective, we performed some data pre-processing because we had some missing values, and for that we imputed them using the nearest neighbor algorithm. Then we applied the PCA part of the PCR method. So we decomposed the SDG metrics into latent orthogonal components and revealed the underlying development structures. Then we applied the regression on the principal components, meaning that the shadow economy was regressed on the principal components. And in the fourth step, we had the validation. And going now to the empirical results, here in terms of model selection, it was we found that after the so basically 10 components, we chose 10 components as the cumulative percentage of variance in the shadow economy tends to stabilize after the 10 components. And the implication here is that the SDG system is very complex. And we can now move on to the empirical results of the PCA, the latent SDG dimensions. So here I extracted only the first four components. So the first one is related to the human capital infrastructure. And we see that we have high values for the SDG3, which is related to the health, to the fourth, which is related to education, to the water one, and industry. And we have low values, negative signs for life below water and life on land. And this component represents the social and productive capacity in relation with environmental pressure. The second component, the one related to governance and cooperation, we can see that in terms of partnership, we have a pretty high coefficient, while the negative values were related to the reduced inequalities and also to the responsible consumption. And this would reflect the policy coherence versus the social disparities. Moving on to the third component, which is related to environmental equity balance, we can see that the highest value was related to the consumption this time, meaning the SDG 12, and also the climate one, while the negative values were related to inequalities and life on land, and this component captures the climate equity tensions basically in the emerging economies. Then the last one, the decent work and institutional formalization. We can see the high value of the SDG 8, the decent work, and also the value of partnership. So basically, the key insights from the PCA part of the study. Informality basically responds to bundles of SDGs, not isolated indicators. And we have also some implications, such as the decent work and the institution are considered a cluster, and basically it's a joint, it's a driver that is joint in terms of formalization. In terms of interpretation, PCA reveals the structural architecture of sustainable development, and informality is basically shaped by multi-goal systems, not by, let's say, progress on the individual goals. Here we have the PCR results. So we have the first 7 SDGs here. So we see that no poverty has a negative sign, and in terms of interpretation, poverty reduction basically reduce the reliance on undeclared work and integrating informal workers that is central to the concept of leaving no one behind. And we have some evidence also from the literature. In terms of SDG 2, which is related to zero hunger, again, the coefficient is negative relation. Basically, we have a negative relation. So it related to improve access to basic needs that reduce the informality. The third component, again, negative. So basically, in terms of interpretation, we would need better health systems to reduce shadow activities. The quality of education this time is positive, meaning that an increased level of education that is not matched by sufficient jobs in the formal sector can temporarily raise informality. But our positive sign reflects this. A surge in schooling without labor market absorption leads many educated workers to accept informal roles. And so on. I won't go to each of the SDGs because I think we are kind of in a lack of time. But I will focus on the most important SDG that is related to informality, is the one related to decent work and economic growth. And basically, this positive sign can be explained by the stronger, let's say, labor standards and enforcement that expose basically the undeclared work and raise reporting, and thus the measure of the shadow economy can rise in the transition phase. And we have also some evidence on this. So as a wrap up, in terms of mechanisms identified from the PCR results, the decent works is basically an institutional nexus, and we can see that SDG 8 and SDG 16 would cluster in a core formalization. Then both show negative association with informal activity. So the decent work depends on performance, trust, and labor standards. The growth performance gap, so we saw that there is a rapid economic expansion in the 9th SDG, so the one related to inequalities, that would increase the informal production if basically regulatory capacity lags exist. And also the findings supports the capacity lag hypothesis claimed by Schneider with Ernst and Medina with Schneider. And in terms of social and environmental interactions, we have the SDG 10, 12, and 13 that interact with inequality and regulation. And basically, the environmental standards can push firms underground if costly and unenforced. So as a slogan, we have the fact that informality persists where development progress is uneven across the SDGs. Now, in terms of responses to the initial objectives in the hypotheses, all the objectives were achieved. Yeah, and in terms of hypotheses, the null hypothesis was rejected because we saw that multiple SDGs showed basically significant relationship with informality. So we had to confirm in the fact that SDG 8 and the 16 were very strong and consistent with the reduction in informality. In terms of policy implications, we have the claims for policies, the one that's related to strengthening the decent work policies that are related to SDG 8. Then to reinforce the institutional capacity, the one related to partnerships, to also integrate economic, social, environmental goals in this kind of framework. And I'm very happy that my colleague Liwana is going to present a paper around the ESG, I think right after me. And we also have the multi-ESG coherent formalization strategy. So the main implication of the study is related to the fact that decent jobs go into trust, then the trust into compliance, and then the compliance into some inclusive growth. Let's see, the overall contribution, basically this paper provides the first empirical bridge between the Agenda 2030 related to ADG and the shadow economy. And in terms of limitations, unfortunately, the PCR identifies associations, not the causal effects. So we will need to dig into more econometric methods. Then I don't know, let's say there are some, okay, for example, this one. Although advanced, the mimic outcomes depend on indicator quality and modeling choices. So the estimates that we have are the most accurate in the literature, but we are not sure how accurate in reality they are with just what we use with the data that exists. There is some heterogeneity in the data that we didn't take into account. And in terms of future research direction, we would like to use panel models, some instrumental variables. We can also model key moderating relationships. So basically, we would imply interaction terms between SDGs. We can explore whether the SDG informality relationship differ across income groups. So we can divide into the study. We can cluster the countries according to the IMF or let's say World Bank country classification by income group. And we can also integrate some firm level or worker level SDG-related data sets to complement macro evidence. And for that, we would need to employ some kind of Eurobarometer data. And I think that's it from my side. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Eduardo.
I think Ioana should be the next.
The next is Ioana.
Ioana, can you check if you can share your screen? Otherwise, I have your presentation. Right? Or
sure, I will check right now.
Please. Let me stop the screen.
Can everybody see my presentation?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. I think I have some slow internet connection, so I'll just turn my camera off. Okay, I will make the screen bigger. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Can you put it in full screen? Yeah.
Hopefully it works. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Ioana Birlan. I am a PhD researcher from the Bucharest University of Economic Studies. Together with Professors Adriana Davidescu and Tamara Maria Nae, we have studied the impact of informality on ESG scores in Europe. Perhaps you're asking yourselves why ESG sovereign scores, how are they related to informality? Well, the ESG scores are a very comprehensive national level sustainability metrics across 3 dimensions: environmental, social, and governance. They use standardized comparable indicators, and they are used by credit agencies in sovereign ratings. So all sovereign rating agencies like Fitch, Moody's, S&P use the ESG sovereign score framework to make their ratings. They are also they are standardized, normalized. They are rolled up into a 0 to 100 score. And we have used in our study Refinitiv Sovereign Framework, which integrates over 200 standardized indicators. This is a funny question when we are comparing to our previous presenter, but the reason why we chose ESG scores over the SDG scores is because the sustainable development in the score, they show the distance to optimal sustainable development performance. They are amazing for monitoring UN agenda progress and policy gaps. However, the ESG scores are built specifically for risk and sustainability, and they have another advantage that they are a stable indicator set, which makes them really suitable for a 20-year panel econometric and causal analysis like we had. Like I was saying, these ESG scores are made from over 200, are aggregated from over 200 indicators and multiple components. However, looking at all of the indicators, informality is not included as of yet, which enabled us to perform a causal identification and to perform the propensity score matching analysis. Our core and central question is, does the informal economy measured through the size of the shadow economy causally hinder country sustainability performance as captured by the ESG scores? And we have three main motivations why we use this, why we wanted to study this. First of all, there is a conceptual motivation. There is a missing link in ESG research in the sense that no previous study has linked ESG research to informality. Researchers have studied governance structures in regards to sustainability in the forms of ESG scores, but they have not linked the two. Then there's the empirical motivation. The little studies that do study sustainability in regards to informality usually use correlation as an analysis, and we want to study causality and confounding. And of course, the policy motivation, because reducing informality is not just an economic necessity, but it is also important, as we will see, for sustainable development. For the conceptual foundation, as I was saying, there is a clear literature gap. We have looked at over the ESG framework already has about 30 years of research. So, and in 30 years of research, it has been linked to governance structures. It has been linked to sovereign risk. It has been linked to social policies and institutional efficiency. On the other hand, I don't need to tell everyone here all the research that has been done on the informal economy, but the two have not yet been formalized together. Moving on to our research contributions, we hope to provide a conceptual contribution. We integrated informality into the sustainability measurement. We wanted to identify a structural institutional barrier that is overlooked in ESG analysis. From a methodological contribution, we demonstrated that causal inference techniques in sustainability research are a good idea, and we also provided some policy contributions. Our primary objective, as I said, was to study the causal relationship between informality and ESG performance. We used the propensity score matching to isolate informality's effect while addressing selection bias and confounding. We also, to increase the robustness of our results, we examined how informality did not just affect the global score, but also each pillar. So the environment pillar, the social pillar, and the governance pillar separately to identify if there are differential impacts. For the robustness testing, we did not just use one measure of informality, we used 4. So our baseline was from Professor Schneider's 2022 article where he used the hybrid mimic currency demand approach with COVID-19 updates. Then we compared to Professor Aslani's, Delano's, and Schneider's 2024 article where they enhanced the mimic approach through fixed effects. And we compared with the dynamic general equilibrium model and the traditional mimic approach. Our data sources, we used 29 European countries from 2003 to 2022. So we had panel data. We covered EU and non-EU European countries, and we made sure that we had balanced representation across the regions. For the methodological approach, our treatment definition was that we characterized high informality as being above the medium shadow economy in the data that we had. For the covariance, we made sure to use the regional classification, the membership, and the year fixed effects. And we used 3 matching techniques. The most popular ones, such as nearest neighbor, radius matching, and kernel matching, to add even more robustness to our results. Perhaps one of the matching results, if we only used one matching results, perhaps that would have not been enough to have significant results. Propensity score matching addresses selection bias. So countries with high informality may differ systematically from low informality countries. It creates credible counterfactuals. So our key question is, what would ESG performance of high informality countries look like if they had low informality? So we are not comparing, let's say, Romania to Sweden or Norway. We are comparing Romania to, let's say, Portugal, where we have similar economic indicators, but informality estimates differ. So what would happen to the ESG performance if high informal economies had low informality? We are also using the conditional independence assumption, which is very important for observable confounders. We are using the average treatment effect on treated to measure the impact of high informality on the countries. And finally, we are making a key assumption that is present to any propensity score matching analysis, that no observed confounders simultaneously affect informality and HG after controlling for covariance. This is the mathematical logic behind the propensity score matching. So we are estimating the propensity scores using a logistic regression model. After that, we are calculating the average treatment effect on the treated, and we are computing 3 complementary estimators. So like I said, the nearest neighbor, the radius, and the kernel matching based on our estimated propensity scores. The first empirical results were for the ESG global average treatment results. So we noticed that we have consistent negative effects across all the informality measures. The sign is significant and stable. This means that informality's impact on ESG is robust. So the informal economy lowers the ESG global score by an average of 5 points. And this is significant across all the different type of informality measures. And when we wanted to see the kernel matching before and after, we see this effect. So even after matching, informal economy still has an effect on the ESG score. So it still affects sustainability. Moving on to the environmental results, again, we have consistent negative effects across all the four measures. We see that the sign and magnitude is pretty stable across all estimators. And we also have significant results. We say significant mostly because for the enhanced mimic approach, some of the matching techniques had a lower significance. So they weren't to 0.05, they were to 0.1, so 90% significance. We also saw from our study that there were stronger effects for the DG and traditional mimic approach for the environmental pillar. Moving on to the social pillar, we had less, we have to be honest that even though the results were negative and they had economic logic, they were not as significant as the other ones. So for this approach, the matching techniques that gave the most significant results were the radius and the kernel matching methods. However, for governance, we had the most statistically significant estimates, many at the 1% level, which, of course, indicates low probability that the results are due to chance. The traditional mimic and Schneider produced the strongest and most precise effects, showing that there is a structural link between informality and institutional fragility. These results are to also be expected, and it links back to the previous slide where I showed you the number of variables, the number of indicators that exist for each pillar. We see that the least number of pillars is for governance. So that is where we see the most improvement could appear. And we do suggest that informality measures are included in the governance pillar. And going back to the results, yes, we see this pattern occurring for all the informality measures, even in the DG results. These are the full results. They are included in the paper. I have left them if there are any additional questions at the end. The policy implications are pretty clear that without addressing informality, European sustainability targets will remain out of reach. For those countries with weak institutional capacity, so like Eastern and Southern Europe countries, they face larger formalization challenges, and they really do need a differentiated support strategies. For the limitations, of course, we have for any propensity score matching, we have the observational data. So we cannot rule out that we have included all the co-founders that were unobserved. We also used informality measurement, which includes an inherent uncertainty. So all the shadow economy estimates are model-based. So they themselves have some structural noise and robustness checks. The median split, again, we defined high economic after the median, which simplified things, but again may mask some effects. Future research directions are perhaps we can take the study to the micro level, to the corporate level, and see how ESG compliance and firm formalization affects performance. And of course, we need to take the study further at the macro level through identifying the channels through which informality affects all of the three different pillars. The conclusions are pretty straightforward. Informality systematically reduced the ESG performance by an average of 5 points. The government pillar was the most affected and most significant. We have ensured robustness across the specifications through the different informality measures and through the different matching estimators, and our policy message is that sustainability does require formalization, and that in order for us to have strong institutional foundations, we really need to look at the peripheral sides of sustainability, which in our study was informal structures. Thank you, and if there are any questions, please do ask.
Thank you, Yona. The next is taxation, informality, and sustainability, an integrated analysis. Ignacio Picatoste, Asunción López, and José Picatoste. Somebody here? Nobody? Well, follow we on the impact of labor informality on the non-monetary privatization of the households and analyze on multidimensional poverty in Argentina. Guillermina Comas and Juan Ignacio Bonfiglio.
Hello.
Juan Ignacio? Go.
Here. Yes. I will share
Just
the
a moment.
slides. Can you see the slide?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
Yes, okay.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good evening. We are Guillermina Comas and Juan Ignacio Bonfiglio, researchers working with the INSEAI project with institutional affiliation to the University of Buenos Aires y el Observatorio de la Deuda Social Argentina. It is a pleasure to share this workshop with you as an opportunity to exchange experiences and perspective of the phenomena we studied. The study of the relationship between poverty and labor informality has a long tradition in Latin America. Numerous studies have analyzed the composition of the informal sector, its changes, and its role in social reproduction. One of the most remarkable aspects has to do with the low incomes earned by informal workers. These facts tend to affect households' subsistence conditions, leading to situations of poverty. However, this perspective does not fully capture a central resource for accessing well-being, social protection. Informal workers not only tend to earn lower incomes, but they also remain outside the social security networks that structure welfare regimes based on formal employment, as the case of Argentina and other countries. This takes us to a key point of interest: the limitations of poverty measures that rely solely on current household income. We argue that multidimensional measures which capture the effective satisfaction of essential needs.
One moment, Juan Ignacio, one moment.
Yes.
Because I cannot share the what's happening here. Where is it?
What? Hmm? Is there any problem?
Con Ignacio no vemos las diapositivas.
Okay. I will share. No, I am sharing. I can let you them and oh. Okay, I will try. I can't share now.
You can share, yeah?
Now I can share.
So try to share.
Yes, it's inhabilitated. It don't allow me to share.
Quiero dar permiso, pero no lo encuentro.
Yes.
Ahí está.
Maybe if I sign out and enter.
Right now.
Now you can.
Okay.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Put in full screen. No, it's a PDF.
This no. A moment, please. I will try now.
Here is her. Here.
A ver.
Yeah, okay.
Ahora sí.
Okay, pick up
You
in
can see
full
them?
screen.
Sí, sí.
Yes, but you pick up in full screen, right? Yeah, okay.
Perfect. Yes, I
Okay.
full screen. Can you see them now?
Okay.
No? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I resume now. I was talking about that the limitations of poverty measures that rely solely on current household income. We argue that multidimensional measures provide a more comprehensive and accurate assessment of the resources available at households. This study seeks to broaden the traditional view of poverty measured through income by incorporating the lack of social protection associated with labor precariousness as an explanatory factor of multidimensional poverty. That is, we consider it as a resource, not a specific deprivation or dimension, although conceptually it could also be interpreted in those terms. Our analysis aims to identify the effect of lacking affiliation to the social security system and the cumulative effect of exclusion from social protection based on household trajectories between 2021 and 2024. The empirical analysis is based on the survey Encuesta de la Deuda Social Argentina conducted by the Observatorio de la Deuda Social Argentina. The survey is carried out annually with national urban representation covering localities with over 80,000 inhabitants and major metropolitan areas. This source includes an internal household panel enabling the construction of a longitudinal database for the years 2021 and 2024. A multidimensional poverty measure was developed to capture deprivation in non-monetary dimensions of well-being. The analysis follows a dual cut-off approach of the Alcaraz-Foster counting method. The selected dimensions include access to health, education, housing, financial stress, and food security. Reflects elements such as the involuntary reduction of food portions, episode of hunger due to financial constraints, households which have been unable to obtain medication, housing-related elements such as inadequate materials, overcrowding, and sanitation deficits. Economic stress is also considered. Each dimension has been weighted proportionally, and the 33% deprivation cutoff has been used. Affiliation to the social security system is measured in accordance with the absence of any income from registered employment at the household level. The situation of cumulative severity was defined when a household registers lack of affiliation to the social security system in at least 2 years between 2021 and 2024. We begin with a simple observation. Both income poverty and multidimensional poverty increased between 2021 and 2024 2021 and 2024. Yet household level affiliation to the social security system did not change. In other words, there were no shifts in the occupational structure, or if there were, they did not translate into changes at the household level. The occupational structure remained relatively stable, and yet household well-being deteriorated steadily and substantially. The following question arises: how is vulnerability organized? Looking at trends in the dimensions of multidimensional poverty index, we observe a process of internal reconfiguration of deprivations. Dimensions related to the consumption capacity deteriorate more sharply than those linked to more structural factors. It's crucial to highlight that the deterioration in access to health-related expenditures, energy service costs, economic stress factors are tied not only to income, but also to the role of state interventions in the form of social insurance and more or less target subsidies. The correlation between income poverty and multidimensional poverty is consistent, but far from perfect. It weakens in 2024, precisely when income deterioration becomes more severe. This suggests that income alone does not explain the full variation in non-monetary deprivation. Protective factors may mitigate monetary deprivation, or monetary deprivation may exacerbate its consequences. The correlation between multidimensional poverty and affiliation to the social security system shows a different pattern. Although consistently lower than income poverty, it remains stable and robust throughout the period. Overall, the evidence suggests that both monetary and non-monetary deprivations are strongly correlated with multidimensional poverty, but with different intensities. This leads us to develop explanatory models that allow us to analyze the effect of each resource under study on multidimensional poverty, income, and deprivation. Models 1 and 2 show that effect of each predictor defined for multidimensional poverty, and in both cases the predictors are statistically significant with reasonably square values. The model fits better for income poverty than for lack of affiliation to the social security system. When incorporating both factors into the analysis, model 3, both remain statistically significant. Income poverty exhibit higher predictive power than lack of social security, but both effects are relevant. Importantly, and consistent with our expectation, even when controlling for income deprivation, lack of affiliation for the social security system exerts an additional net effect on multidimensional well-being. A final aspect worth highlighting is the cumulative effect of lacking social security affiliation. Households with community exclusion have much more higher odds for experiencing multidimensional poverty, controlling for all other factors. Conclusions. Multidimensional poverty is linked to problems that go beyond deprivation of current income. Monetary constraint and exclusion from the social security system operate as different mechanisms. Logistic regression models allow for a more precise decomposition of this mechanism, while income recovery is essential for expanding well-being and reducing persistent inequality gaps. Progress in coverage, expansion, and improvement of social protection system is equally crucial. Strengthening the system helps establish foundation citizenship floors within a framework of equality. Well, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is Ignacio Asunción or Jose is there? No. Well, I think we have some minutes for any question, any comments about the different paper in this session, including Diana paper about labor market, right? question? Matthias.
It is on the
Making the work.
yeah, and it is on the last
Previous.
presentation. You saw that informality reduces ESG performance. I think that's a quote from your presentation. And I wonder if this is really informality is an autonomous factor, or is informality simply an expression of other weaknesses which in the economy and society, which may have a negative effect on ESG performance. So do you think that informality is something, an independent factor influencing ESG performance?
Fiona, do you understand?
I think I heard part of the question, but not the whole question. It might be too far away. I think the question was if informality directly impacts ESG or if it is one factor of it.
Yes.
I think that the way that the ESG scores are formulated so far is that they do include, it's not just they don't just include the GDP or population size or so on, things that are measurable. They also include the estimates such as the Human Development Index and digitalization and so on. So I do think that informality could be included as part of the framework. The results did show when controlling for confounding effects through the covariates that it did have a significant effect on the ESG performance. I don't know if that answered your question. Maybe.
Any more questions? Or 50 minutes to relax? 15 minutes of relax and then we will continue. Because the next session only have 3 papers. As Tatiana, sorry, exposed her paper, right? We have digitalization and informality, the effect on internal expansion, and resistance to formalization in domestic. 3 papers. Quarter to 6 here in Niteroi. Quarter to 10 in Europe, all right? You go to dinner and we go for a coffee, right?
Bueno, voy a cenar. Ahora vengo.
Okay. Maybe you have coffee.
Will we get all the presentations? Yes.
Yes, we have 3 presentations.
We will get the slides. My presentation. Tomorrow, yes. Representation.
Nope, I'm not sure. Let me to see.
I don't know how. I didn't send to anyone. You sent me your email.
One of these. ¿Alguna de estas es?
No.
Tienes un USB?
I can send to you. What's the email? What's the?
No, the problem is that is the computer, I don't know. Maybe you send to me and. Yeah, okay.
I know.
Send to me.
To you?
It's Resga or INSEAI. We got the INSEAI workshop.
This one.
This one, yes.
I can send to you the chat.
Hola?
Hola.
És que vaig a veure perquè m'agradaria poder fer una prova de compartir. Hola, Òscar.
¿Quién eres?
¿Estás ahí?
Sí, soy yo. Hola.
Compartir, sí. Compartir, dile compartir.
Óscar, ¿me oyes?
Sí.
Vale, voy a mirar, voy a intentar compartir para ver que no pase nada después. Comprueba a ver, porque no lo he utilizado nunca Teams para compartir y no sé si algo puede fallar, ¿vale? ¿Se ve?
No, en par, me lo tienes que enviar a mí para compartir. A ver, no se ve. Te tengo,
Espera,
te tengo que...
Uy, espera, es que no tenía... Vale.
Espera un momento.
Hola.
Espera un momento, te tengo que autorizar yo para compartir.
Vale, es por hacer la prueba que no haya después ningún problema ni coger tiempos de nadie. Vale,
Vale, vale.
vale.
Espérate porque no te veo aquí. ¿eh?
Vale,
Pero
cuando tú me
bueno,
digas yo intento probar y así vemos que no haya ningún problema y no tomo tiempo después.
¿por qué no estás aquí?
Aparece como Teresa.
Apareceré como Teresa en par, que Teresa
Vale,
es mi primer nombre, aunque nadie me conoce por Teresa.
vale, estás aquí, estás
Sí.
camuflada. ¿eh?
Muy bien.
No. ¿Sí? Okay.
It's not gonna work. If you do this, she will lose.
No. Yes, it's possible to share. Ahora puedes. Comparte
¿No?
ahora.
Ok,
Ahora.
vale.
Comparte
Uy,
ahora.
ahora no, ahora me dice que prohibido, ahora no me da opción. No me sé los organizadores y presentados de la reunión, dice que solo los organizadores y pueden compartir.
You remove her instead of adding. That's what I said.
En cambio, antes sí que me daba la opción.
La he quitado.
Sí, en vez de por eso te hablaba el chico.
No me había dado cuenta.
Ve a ella misma.
Ya, sí, pero ¿dónde está? Tres.
¿Quieres? Santos, déjame preguntar.
¿Sí?
Para ir más rápido, para que va más rápido.
¿Por qué?
No lo dejas hacer.
Yo creo que esta podía hablar, ¿no? Pero bueno, yo creo que enfocaré desde aquí está. Sí, enfocaré desde aquí está, sí.
Ahora puedes, Teresa.
Vale, sí, ahora. Vale, muy bien. Vale.
Ahora está haciendo el amago.
¿Ahora?
Está haciendo el
Sí.
amago, pero todavía no se ve.
Pero todavía no se ve.
No, ha hecho el amago, pero no.
Pues no sé qué puede estar fallando.
Tú tienes que presentar agora. Tú já mandou a mensagem? Eu mandei para ele também, mas eu acho que eu vou ele vai apresentar a sua.
Ok. You can connect by there.
Right.
Deja de compartir y vuelve a compartir, a ver.
Vale, voy a ver.
Ese es el problema de ella, Santos. No tienes que hacer nada más.
Ya.
Anar a la hora. Mira, deixa de compartir.
Sí, deixe de compartir i torno a intentar-ho. I si ho faig d'una altra manera, per finestra.
Finestra, veure.
I per finestra, per exemple, aquí. ¿Ahora? ¿Con esta mejor?
No, todavía no.
Solo
no sé qué puede estar fallando. A ver.
Si quieres, mándamelo por correo electrónico y te lo pongo yo aquí.
Sí, es una posibilidad.
Pero
vamos a ver si lo conseguimos.
Pasarlo.
Sí, claro, porque así os libero de tener que pasarlo. Vamos a ver, a intentar, que seguro que algo está fallando y se puede arreglar. Vamos a ver. Ahora, pues que, ¿cómo puede ser? A ver, vamos a intentar por aquí. A ver. ¿Cómo puede ser que no estiga? Permitent.
Ara deus estar compartint. Dóna-li, maximitza la pantalla, veure.
Tal vegada, por
No,
ahí.
pero tampoco se veu, ¿eh? Tampoco se veu.
¿Ah, sí, Óscar? ¿No?
No se veu.
No se veu. Ostras.
Deixa de compartir.
Y qué cosa más rara, pero es que es
Torna a provar.
una tontería, hombre. Vuelvo a probar. A ver, voy a darle a este botoncito.
No, eso espera en clau.
Vale. A ver, afegeixo pantalla, finestra.
Fica
Digues.
pantalla, veure.
Sí, pantalla.
Sí, ahora.
No està normal.
N'hi ha
Ahora
hagut un
sí?
moment que has compartit, però s'ha compartit tota la pantalla, no el PowerPoint. N'hi ha hagut un moment que s'ha vist el que era que comparties, però no se veia el PowerPoint.
Vale.
Torna a provar.
Vamos a volver. Vamos a volver.
Vale. Escucha, Teresa. Dale compartir. ¿Lo has ido a compartir, Teresa?
Sí. Le estoy dando todo el rato a compartir.
Pero tienes que seleccionar lo que quieres compartir. Es que no estás seleccionando el PowerPoint, estás seleccionando otra
Claro,
cosa. Vale,
claro, claro.
vuelve otra vez a compartir.
Vale, vale, vamos
Y
a
ahí
ver. A
te
ver.
aparecen varias opciones, selecciona el PowerPoint. ¿Lo tienes
Vale, vamos
abierto?
a ver. Sí, un segundo. Sí, 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 lo tengo abierto. Un segundito.
Pues selecciona él.
A ver, espérate, a ver, cancelar. A ver, un momentito. Voy a cerrarlo todo.
¿Guardar o no guardar?
Vale, espera, a ver. Vaig a tornar-lo a obrir. A veure què ha passat així. Documentos. A ver, a ver, a ver. Seguro que lo arreglamos. A ver,
Tenemos que trabajar.
a ver, a ver. Vale.
¿Sabes qué se dice?
Sí, sí.
Vale, fica la pantalla sencera. I ara, espera, i anem a alt regulador i anem a... Sí, vale.
Vale.
Dile ara comparteix
Vale.
i ara veure, serà finestra, m'imagine, no?
No, és que no és finestra, és que, bueno, pot ser a finestra,
Vale.
però és que si tires cap avall,
Presentación. Fica ahí,
n'hi ha...
¿vale?
Pero ahí
No,
me
esa.
n'estic anant al
Vale, vale.
Ficer.
És que no, encara
¿Ah,
no
sí?
es veu. No,
Ah, encara no es veu,
Selecciona,
vale.
selecciona el PowerPoint.
Sí.
No has seleccionado el PowerPoint. Has seleccionado otra cosa.
Voy a entrar por pantalla. A ver.
ara que esteu veient.
Ahí, ahora.
No,
Déjalo
no,
ahí.
però és que ese soc
Sí,
jo,
sí.
ese soc jo, eso soy yo.
Ah, pero tú puedes presentarle el suyo. Oscar,
Mira,
lo puedes hacer tú.
Yo el PowerPoint lo tengo, pero sí, bueno, tenerlo lo tengo. Lo que no tengo
Es
es
el
la
mismo.
el mismo no, pero voy a comunicar con Empar, con Teresa. Un momento.
Podemos sesionar acá abajo. Voy a ver a Sandro acá.
Hola. ¿Qué pasó? ¿Que no presentasteis el nuevo workshop? Vale, vale. Bueno. Vale, vale. Te dejo que estoy aquí, ya hablaremos. Venga, hasta luego, hasta luego. Ahora, ¿me escuchas? Bar, ¿me escuchas?
Ahora se ve, ¿verdad?
Sí, ahora se ve.
Genial. Vale, pues vamos a ver que no falle nada. Muy bien, pues ya está.
¿Tantos?
Sí, dime.
Una pregunta, que es que acabo de ver una noticia que ha habido un incendio allí en Brasil, en la COP 30, ¿puede ser?
La COP 30.
Sí,
No
sí, ha
sé
habido
lo
un
que es.
incendio. Pues hay una reunión allí de mandamases. Y digo, a ver si.
Ya, en el grupo de los 30, sí, pues No tengo ni idea,
Ha habido
supongo que será en Brasilia, supongo.
No lo sé, no lo sé. Simplemente era pues por curiosidad si, no sé, si había revuelo
No,
allí por aquellos lugares. Nada, era eso
no,
simplemente.
aquí es fiesta, además, hoy es fiesta, con lo cual esto está vacío. La universidad estamos nosotros y poco más. Y no tengo información.
Ah, vale, vale. Hoy es día feriado. Allí.
Sí.
Bueno, vale, pues era eso. Nada.
Oscar, se hace en Belén. Es en la ciudad de Belén.
Vale.
Es en Belén.
Sí. Ha habido, parece que un incendio muy aparatoso. Lo estaban comentando ahora.
You're going to be.
We are not ready to
Well, so, Miranda, are you ready to expose? Miranda?
Yes, I'm here. I think Silvana is also here. Wait a moment.
Who is going to expose? Miranda or Silvana? You need to share.
We both will, but I will share my screen if it's okay.
Okay. You can do, right?
Yes, I can. No, now I don't. A moment ago I could.
Miranda.
I don't know why. I could go out and enter again.
Oh, now?
Yes. Now, yes. I'm here. So, okay. Is Silvana here? Here. See.
Yes,
Okay.
Silvana is in the screen, right?
Perfect. Share.
Good evening, both.
Good evening for you all.
Well, first you, Miranda, Silvana, Eduardo, Jessica, and Agustin. Then Joao Lima is over here. Joao. Yeah. On your computer, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And then Par That's it. There is no more. Okay, when you want. Come on.
Okay, can you see the presentation correctly?
Yes, we can see, right.
Perfect. So Silvana was going to begin.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We cannot hear you, Silvana. It's very far, so far. Like the microphone, your microphone maybe. No, okay, now it's okay, right.
Now it's better? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hi everyone. First of all, we'd like to thank you, INSEAI, for the invitation. And thank you all for being here. I'm Silvana Galeano Alfonso from the University of Buenos Aires. And today we're going to present with Miranda Correa, who is from the Catholic Argentina University, the results of research we made with Eduardo Donza, Agustín Salvia, and Jessica Pla, other colleagues from these two Buenos Aires universities. We decided to title the presentation as Digitalization and Informality, a New Occupational Frontier in Middle-Income Economies, a study on working conditions and job satisfactions. We first identify a global and a regional context. Globally, we recognize three trends: digitalization, platformization, and digital automation that have transformed the world of work over the last few decades. As a result, the nature of work has changed, and digital labor generates new forms of production, intermediation, and economic valuation. And in the regional context, Latin America faces the tension between using digitalization to expand formality, productivity, and inclusion, or deepen informality and precarity, consolidating new forms of exclusion. So, in this context, this study aims to contribute the production of empirical statistical evidence in the prevalence of work associated with digital resources, tools, or outputs within Argentinians' occupational structure. To achieve this, we define one general objective and three specific ones. The general objective is to analyze the occupational characteristics and working conditions of digitalized workers in the urban Argentine labor market, critically assessing the quality of the employment generated, its articulation with the social security system, and levels of job satisfaction in order to understand how the structural heterogeneity and labor informality of the Argentine labor market also manifest in work associated with digital resources, tools, or outputs. Then we have the first specific objective, which aims to estimate the magnitude and characterize the diversity of digital labor. The second objective is to compare working conditions, analyzing differences in income, labor formality, access to social protection, and job satisfaction. And the third one looks for examining the extent to which work associated with digital resources, tools, or outputs operates either as a refugee employment for assistance or as a valued option due to autonomy and flexibility. So after reviewing the existing literature, we decided to take a broad view of the concept of digital labor. We based our approach on the proposal put forward by Charles, Sia, and Katz in the report for the ILO. They argue that any job that uses or is made possible by information and communication technologies can be considered digital employment or employment in the digital economy. And they recognize an internal heterogeneity of the digital labor and divide it into three segments. ICT-intensive jobs, characteristic of the technological core or technological sector, ICT-dependent jobs, which could now exist without digital mediation, such as platform work or e-commerce, and ICT enhanced jobs, referring to traditional occupation transformed through the adoption of digital tools. And regarding empirical studies, we would like to highlight 3 aspects. One is about the software and IT service sector. Research on ASI sector constitutes a distinct topic with the labor studies. It has rarely been articulated under a unified concept of digital labor, such as by authors like Dosho, and as a group separate from platform work. The second point is the platform work profile in Argentina. Although in the early years it was established as a young sector dominated by men with a higher level of education and large migrant population, more recent studies show that there has been a decrease in the average age, a lower level of education, a decrease in the participation of migrants. Finally, from the structuralist perspective of Latin America, we recognize that there is a segmentation of digital workers and digital labor that reflects the structural heterogeneity of Latin American labor markets, where informality and precarity are not anomalies, but constitutive features. So our information is based on the 2024 edition of La Encuesta de la Deuda Social Argentina, ETSA, an annual survey conducted by the Observatory of the Argentine Social Debt at the Pontifical Catholic University of Argentina. We create a variable type of digitalized works, understanding digital labor as any labor activity mediated by digital technologies, particularly carried out through a mobile application or a web platform. We use the following question of the survey. Do you perform any of your job through a mobile application or web platform? And the response options were yes as my main occupation, yes as a secondary occupation, or no. And the variable was then constructed inductively, considering only cases that responded yes as my main occupation. And we cutting them into groups based on an early open-ended question detailing the nature of the occupation. And the different groups that we formed were digitalized workers producing digital technological goods belonging to the technological sector of the economy whose work is carried out through digital platforms, digitalized workers using online work tools who employ platforms or application as support for the task. Platform workers whose occupations are performed through labor platforms that mediate the supply and demand of services, and digital merchants or e-commerce who sell goods or service through platform or social media.
So then I wanted to briefly summarize the main findings that we had on our study on the role of digital work in the Argentine labor market based on, as we said before, representative data from the ETSA 2024 survey. So our motivation at first was simple. Although we said digitalization is often presented as a transformative force, in middle-income countries like ours, which are characterized by structural heterogeneity and high informality, solid empirical evidence is still scarce. We wanted to understand who enters this kind of works, digitalized works in Argentina, and how do these jobs differ in terms of working conditions, income, and job satisfaction. So here's the first fact to keep in mind is that 16.7% of employed adults in Argentina perform digitalized work as their main occupation. So yes, we see that digitalization is growing, but it's still far from being a dominant form of employment, at least here. So more importantly, we saw that the largest group within digitalized work isn't platform workers or digital commerce. We see it's people who use digital tools in traditional occupations that incorporate these these platforms to their own duties, like teachers giving online classes or office employees using management systems or technicians communicating with clients online and so on and so on. So this tells us that the digitalization cuts across sectors, but it doesn't necessarily mean there are new intermediate platform-based jobs. Then when we break down digitalized work by occupational insertion, we see that the segmentation appears here. We see that digital production, such as software or IT services, is concentrated among formal employees and self-employed professionals. Then the use of digital tools is also mainly located in formal salaried work, though it spills over also into lower skilled informal jobs. Digital commerce is dominated by non-salaried and non-professional workers, and last, platform work like delivery, transport, or on-demand services shows there is a strong presence of informal employees and low-skilled self-employed workers. So here we see that digitalization does not homogenize work, but reproduces existing divides. And we think that understanding this device is key because they shape the working condition that these workers can access. So overall, our data shows that digitalized jobs are more registered or formalized than non-digital ones. We see as 53% versus nearly 47%, but this average hides once again a polarization where 90% of digital production workers are registered, while we see that only 17% of digital commerce workers and 34% of platform workers are. It's kind of shocking, I think. When we turn to income, the picture becomes even more nuanced because we see on average digitalized works earn 6% more than the rest. But once again, this average conceals a strong contrast. Digital production earns roughly 27% more than the national average, and users of digital tools also show a positive differential. But as we see digital commerce or platform workers, we see they face severe income penalties from around 45 and even 47 less percent than the average employed person. So we see that this pattern also repeats with social protection around health. Workers in digital production and use of tools mostly have contributory or private coverage, while 3 out of 4 platform and digital commerce workers rely exclusively on the public systems. Here, unionization is very low across digitalized work. It's only between 15% of the workers, digitalized workers, and it's almost non-existent in digital production or platform work. We see collective representation remains, at least for now, remains tied to all the labor market structures and not to emerging digital occupations like this. So when however, we wanted to include in the analysis and the discussion the element of job satisfaction, because we had some paradoxical results. Across the whole labor market, we saw that 56% of workers declared to be satisfied with their current job. But among digitalized workers, we saw that this proportion is consistently higher. The fact that almost 3 out of 4 workers in digital commerce and platform works declare to be satisfied with their current situation is at least may seem contradictory after we saw right before that they have objectively worse working conditions. This analytical dimension requires considering both objective and subjective factors with elements such as flexibility, self-management, or even a sense of belonging to a more modern type of work, and even higher or lower expectations we have on our own about labor that strongly influence the perceived satisfaction of the workers. So to check if these gaps persist after accounting for other factors, we ran a set of regression models. We looked at here at 2 dimensions, whether the person is salaried or not, and whether they work in a structured sector or in a micro-informal one. We also adjusted for some socio-demographic factors like level of education, age, gender, and household headship. So first, the analysis of the probabilities of having registered employment show they increase only in high skill or structure segments, specifically digital production and the use of digital tools. In contrast, we saw that platform work and digital commerce do not break informality. Even among salaried workers, they actually reduce the odds of being registered or don't show differences compared to non-digitalized workers. Second, the models confirm that there is no generalized digital wage premium. Positive returns seems to, compared to digitalized non-digitalized jobs, appear only for self-employed tech workers and formal employees who use digital work tools, where modalities associated with subsistence strategies or low-skilled work reinforce existing wage gaps. Finally, with job satisfaction, we observe there is a dual pattern. We see that higher quality segments display greater satisfaction because of objective improvements, but in precarious segments like platforms and e-commerce, satisfaction arises mainly from autonomy, flexibility, and lower expectations rather than from tangible gains, as we mentioned before. So the regression models show that the effects of digitalization are highly segmented and depend fundamentally on where digital work is embedded within the labor market. So to summarize, let me close with three key conclusions that derive from our analysis. At first, we said that digitalization reproduces structural heterogeneity. This concept we introduced at the very beginning. We see high-skill, knowledge-intensive segments show higher formalization and better incomes, but low-scale modalities tend to operate as a refugee employment where they have low earnings, weak protection, limited formalization, and reproduce a low productivity. Second, job satisfaction doesn't follow objective conditions linearly. Even in precarious segments, satisfaction can still be high because workers value autonomy, flexibility, and a sense of independence. And third, digitalization does not replace informality. Instead, we say it reorganizes it under new technological arrangements, often deepening vulnerabilities pre-existent among the most fragile groups. So these findings point to some clear policy implications that because we need regulatory frameworks that can adapt to hybrid work modalities, we thought about portable social protection, inclusive registration mechanism, and strategies to reduce digital skill gaps. And they highlight also why comparative research is essential to these aims, like we say understanding how different institutional and welfare models shape these effects of digitalization is crucial for designing inclusive labor policies. So this is all. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Silvana and Miranda. No. Well.
Me to present.
Take it. I don't know if it is here. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, I'll be seated. Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Joel. I am a PhD student at Paris University, and I will present to you a little bit of my findings on the effect of internet expansion and on informal employment opportunities in Brazil. So, by the internet access expansion, I mean what happened in the past decade in Brazil. I mean fast internet that came with fiber optics. So there was an increase in internet speed in Brazil and internet speed connections that happened at the same time as like fiber optics replace like all the technology in Brazil. So by that we can see also that people started using more internet for work, and like from less people had like fast internet access, like almost no one before, and now it's like most of the population have access to high-speed internet. So from this idea, what motivates me is to see how this technology is like affecting like the labor market, because as we know from previous research, is that technology reshapes labor markets, and digital transformation will change the way we work, and internet connectivity in this sense will be the enabler of this digital transformation and digitalization. And here it's unclear whether this shift, this digitalization will shift employment towards informal work or to formal employment. So we'll check. So what I mean that by technology reshapes labor market is that we know that technological change does not destroy more jobs than it replaces. It affects different jobs in different ways. So it may affect jobs based on the skill of their workers. So different technologies will affect workers by their skill levels or by the type of tasks they perform. So usually the kind of jobs that are replaced are routine jobs, and they're replaced by non-routine jobs. They can be manual or cognitive. So the idea of the polarization of the labor market, because routine jobs are more like middle skill jobs. So we have low skill jobs and high skill jobs in the end. So if we think that in informal sector, most jobs are low skilled, so this technological change will affect like transitions from job to job, and maybe will create some pathways to formalization and to informalization. So there is a formalization argument that the digital tools and like or the government, they will facilitate or they reduce costs to formalization. So they allow more people to formalize their jobs. And also at the same way, in a different way actually, like there is a pathway to informality. So as I said, like the routine-based technological change will complement like skilled labor and substitute like routine tasks, and in the end may push some people into informality. And also this is the main mechanism that I think is playing a role here, is the reduced cost of being informal. So it's harder to detect informality online. There's a hypothesis. And they also, internet and digital tools will act exactly on the main constraints of the informal sector, which is like grow without raising the size. So you can grow without being detected. And also like you'll have expanded networks like with this growth, and also access to digital payment methods. And also like the cost reduction in digital tools may also reduce barrier to enter in formal sector, because before only formal firms had access to some digital tools, and now those digital tools are very cheap and available to most of the population, which can make them compete with formal firms, and informal firms competing with formal firms, pushing some formal firms or making some formal firms to hire informal workers. So the central research question here is, does access to high internet speed will impact the probability of getting employed in the informal sector in Brazil? So in a nutshell, how this paper is organized is, the said motivation is that technology, particularly internet connectivity, is an enabler of digital transformation, but it's unclear whether it facilitates formal or informal employment. So by this, I have this research question. I want to know whether like high internet speed impacts probability of getting employed in the informal sector. The hypothesis is that digitalization will reduce costs, disproportionately benefit informal firms and informal workers. And the empirical strategy I use is an instrumental variable, which is the backbone of infrastructure. I use infrastructure for internet in Brazil as a proxy to measure the evolution of high internet speed. So the main findings are that increased internet access to fast internet is associated with lower probability of formalization and a higher probability of informalization overall. The positive effects is found specifically in transition from lower tier informal to lower tier informal self-employment. So you get into that. So the data I use, first, my key explanatory variable is internet speed, as I see here, is measured as the number of fixed broadband internet connections with speeds over than 34 megabytes per second per capita in a region at a time. So the idea is that it will capture the technological advancement in a region and the digital access to this region. The source is the Brazilian National Telecommunication Agency. So it's the administrative data. So this is how it evolves over time for all Brazil. But I measure this actually for different divisions in Brazil. But overall, you can see that before 2016, like it was, most of people didn't have fast internet access, and now it's like almost like one internet connection per person. So it's widely available, and it's this shift of internet access that I will use as explanation for as my source of variation to explain transitions. So, and my instrumental variable here is the share of population covered by backhaul fiber infrastructure. So it means that if in your region you have a cable, so the infrastructure like that brings internet to your municipality, there is a higher chance that you will have high internet speed. So if you don't have like a cable that connects your city, it's harder for you to have internet speed. And this backhaul infrastructure I use only for 2016 to not allow it to affect the current labor market. So the idea is that access to this infrastructure here is exogenous to the current period informality, informal employment, and labor market outcomes. So this is how like the infrastructure works, and you'll have like this black lines are the cables, and if you are like closer to the cables, you can see your internet speed is higher. So the red means like higher internet speed. So being closer to the cables, high internet speed. So my dependent variables are transitional. So from the last period to the current period, if you would like in a work status or unemployed or formal employed, and we'll see here most of the transitions. Like for formal, I divide the labor market like in different categories, like to allow for different kinds of informality to show up. So I analyze transitions to formal wage employment, self-employment, informal upper tier self-employment, and upper tier wage employment, and lower tier self-employment, lower tier wage employment. So upper tier, lower tier is based on the kind of job they have, or the kind of skill they need, based on the high school database. So it's the idea that upper tier jobs they have restricted entry, or you need more skills to perform. So that's how it's divided. Most of the population is employed in the formal wage sector, and you have here like our population moving on the other. So lower tier informal self-employed workers are the majority. So I have some control variables here to control to some another circles here, other circles variables that I have. And my data set in the end it's based on a rotating panel data set, so I can follow each individual for 5 periods of time, and I can see if they transition from one period to another between jobs. And I have this from 2017 after, like the backbone infrastructure that they had collected the data, and 2023. These for 146 interstate divisions in Brazil. So the empirical strategy here, as I have an endogeneity problem with internet access, I solved this before in a two-stage regression. So in the first stage, I regressed the internet speed, like the number of high internet speed connections on the fiber backhaul infrastructure in 2016. The idea is that having access to the fiber in 2016 will explain your internet speed today. So, but will not explain the informal labor market today. So the idea here is that I have a source of uncertainty coming from this. So the identification assumptions are that divisions with more backhaul fiber in 2016 had a stronger starting point. So if you have in 2016 this infrastructure, it means that from now on it's easier for people to have internet connection. And after that, that the location of those networks, they're primarily driven by regulations. So this is very important, that the infrastructure that is not only on places where the labor market was stronger or that they were growing more, richer places, they were selected based on the lack of the idea of universalization of internet access. So it was planned by the government, not only like driven by labor market options. So, and this we can see like with different tests. So the change in informality rate doesn't explain having fiber backhaul, nor even the per capita income, and nor even the population size. You can see that the only thing that explains having the backhaul infrastructure in 2016 is having less internet connections. So it means that the government was choosing like places with low internet accessibility to put them to expand the network. So my second stage question here is like I am regressing. But yeah, as I said, the variable, the ultimate variable I'm interested in is the binary one for transition for an individual, and explained by the internet speeds instrument by the backbone infrastructure. So this is a linear probability model. So you'll see now those. And as we can see, for all employment, having access to faster internet have a higher probability of finding a job. This transitions from unemployment to employment. So having internet access will allow you to find there is a higher probability to have a job. But this is true only for informal jobs, like informal wage, upper tier jobs, and informal self-employed lower tier jobs. For job exit probability, so for the chance of losing your job, there is also a higher chance of losing your job after that having internet connection, not losing or maybe leaving your job. And this is true mostly for informal workers too. And this is in line with the last last presentation, that it looks like a reshaping of the informal sector that is happening. So this is for 95% confidence interval, like 10%, like the informal wage upper tier and informal wage lower tier, they are significant. So, and for formalization or informalization transition between formal jobs and informal jobs, we'll see for all informal jobs, there's a lower probability of formalization. And for all formal jobs, there is a higher probability of informalization. And this is especially true for informal workers working in self-employment jobs and upper tier informal workers. And so the conclusion here is that few workers who live in formality for formality suggest that internet is increasing the opportunity cost of formalization, and increased access to fast internet will benefit transitions in lower tier informal self-employment. And this is like, if you think of a sort of survival view of the informal sector, it looks like the internet is making the informal sector better to work. So if you need to survive, that it makes easier to survive, and it makes more attractive to enter in the informal sector. So what I say is like upgrading the informal sector. That's it.
It's very dark to review the future. Huh? Nobody pays taxes, nobody pays social security.
Yeah.
It's a good public pension. Right. Okay, en par.
Claudia, en par.
1 second.
We cannot see you. Okay.
It's okay?
Yes.
Can you see? Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for being here today. My name is Empar Aguado from the University of Valencia, and in the next 20 minutes, I would like to present our work. This presentation summarizes research conducted with my colleagues Josep Vicent Picher and Oscar Muñoz. Our purpose is to understand why, despite significant legal improvement over the past decade, informality continues to be deeply embedded in domestic and care work in Spain. I will follow the structure shown here. I will begin with the main contextual elements and our methodological approach. Then I will describe the position of domestic work within the Spanish care regime, followed by the theoretical framework and the evolution of the legal regulation. After that, I will discuss precarity and informality before presenting the qualitative findings on the barriers to formalization, and finally, the main conclusions. Spain provides a particularly relevant context for analyzing domestic and care work. The country is experiencing accelerated population aging and one of the lowest fertility rates in Europe. At the same time, women's participation in the labor market has increased considerably since the late 20th century. However, men's contributions to unpaid reproductive work has progressed slowly, creating a persistent imbalance in the gender division of labor. All these dynamics, combined with insufficient public care services, place significant pressure on families, especially on women. Structural shortcoming on public services, insufficient to guarantee adequate and universal care for children and elder people in situation of dependency. For many households, the option is hire domestic and care workers, a segment where precarity and informality are high. Our objective is to shed light on the barriers that prevent domestic and care workers from transitioning from informal to formal employment. The central hypothesis is that persistent informality is not the product of isolated individual choices, but rather the result of a complex combination of structural, institutional, economic, and cultural factors. Methodologically, we adopt a mixed approach combining secondary statistical analysis with semi-structured interviews. We spoke with a trade union representative, non-governmental organization professionals, a labor law scholar, members of a domestic workers association, including women with direct experience in the sector. Together, these sources allow us to build a multidimensional understanding of the mechanisms sustaining informality. Spain's care system is hybrid regime where care is provided simultaneously by the state, the market, families, and the community. Within this system, the category known as NAC 197, meaning the direct hiring of domestic workers by household, plays a central role. Spain relies on the mode of provision much more than neighboring European countries. And it is precisely in this form of provision that we find the highest degrees of precariousness and informality. This demand is largely met by migrant women who occupy a structurally vulnerable position in the labor market. To explain this vulnerability, we rely on a structural approach to labor market and on segmented labor market theory. Domestic and care work trends to fall within the secondary segment of the labor market, characterized by labor-intensive tasks, low wages, weak union presence, limited innovation, and reduced bargaining power. In this segment, working conditions are shaped less by working choices than by the structural context in which families make their labor decision. We complement this with the concept of the social employment regime developed by Carlos Prieto. This framework emphasizes that employment conditions are determined not only by labor law, but also by welfare policies, migration regimes, industrial relations, family arrangement, and cultural norms. Domestic works sit at the intersection of all these institutional fields, which together reinforce situations of vulnerability and informality, even when legislation improves this structural constraints remain firmly. We can see now the legal framework. Spain has introduced remarkable legal reforms in recent years. The 2011 reforms modernized the regulation of domestic work in line with ILO Convention 189. The 20 and 22 reforms eliminate desistimiento, the mechanism that allow it dismissal without cause, and extended unemployment protection to domestic workers. Finally, the 20 and 24 reforms introduce occupational health and safety requirements inside private homes, including risk assessment and protective measures. Despite this progress, legal improvements have not translated into a proportional reduction in informality. Even at its lowest levels, informality never dropped below 30%, and since 20 and 23, it has begun to rise again, as you can see in this graphic. Domestic and care work is marked by chronic precariousness, low wages, fragmented schedules, part-time contracts, and high exposure to occupational risk. Informality appears in two main forms. First, complete non-registration with Social Security, and second, partial complaints where workers are registered for fewer hours than they actually work. Estimates show that between 30 and 60% of workers remain informal. These patterns reveal that legal reforms alone cannot transform a sector whose structural determinants of vulnerability remain intact. We can see now some of our findings. What type of barriers to formality have we detected despite legislative advances? One of these is immigration as a structural producer of informality. The first barrier identified in the interviews concerns immigration law. Newly arrived migrant women must spend long periods, often years also, in an irregular administrative situation before they can legally work. During this time, they must support themselves, repay debts, and often send remittances. Their only option is informal employment. As one participant explained it, say, they have no option but to work informality. It's because they don't have papers. Another interview added, the law on foreigners is functional to precarity. Administrative delays further intensify this vulnerability. Application can take many months, during which women cannot access formal employment. Another gap between law and everyday practices. A second barrier concerns the discrepancies there are between these two aspects. Interviews describe the widespread practice of under-registering working hours. One trade union's representative explained it. They put half-time in the contract, but the women is there all day. This reduces incomes, limits social protection, and normalizes partial compliance. Employers often frame this as a matter of trust. We don't need so much paperwork, but the consequence is the systematic erosion of labor rights. Economic pressures are a third major barrier. For many families, especially those with limited incomes, the cost of fully formalized employment is simple and affordable. One interview pointed out that hiring someone who 2 hours a day means paying a salary of around 80 euros, but more than 90 in social security contribution. This problem is inseparable from the insufficient public provision of care services. When dependent persons require several daily shifts of care, the total cost becomes impossible for families to assume. Informality becomes a survival strategy for both families and workers. Institutional weaknesses also helps sustain informality. Labor inspectors cannot enter private homes without consent, which create what one interview described as a huge sense of impunity. Violation can persist for years without any oversight. Additionally, occupational injuries suffered during domestic wars are often recorded as domestic accidents rather than work-related ones. This prevents right from being activated. Workers fear workers fear retaliation or even denunciation if they report abuse, especially when they lack legal status. Cultural norms also shape these sectors. A deeply rooted narrative suggests that domestic workers are like a family, although these languages appears affectionate each barns for employment, relationship, and justifies expectation of flexibility, emotional labor, and unpaid availability. As one interview noted, there is a long tradition of seeing domestic workers as almost part of the household, not as a worker with rights. Workers reject this idea. One woman said, if we were family, they wouldn't fire us overnight. Life in employment represents the most extreme form of vulnerability. Workers describe being effectively available all day, every day. One participant states, being alive in worker is like being in prison. I call my weekends my third degree because it's the only time I go out. Because housing and employment are tied together, losing a job often means immediately homelessness. Under such conditions, claiming rights becomes nearly impossible. Sorry.
Okay.
No, I am finishing.
Okay.
Private agency and digital platforms may seem to professionalize the sector, but often reproduce precarious conditions. Agencies may charge high fees while paying workers low wages. Some impose conditions preventing workers from being hired directly later on. One interview explained it. Everything was fixed by the agency. I had no say in my hours, and if I complained, they sent someone else. Formalization can therefore coexist with exploitation. Collective organization is extremely difficult in this sector. Domestic workers work alone with irregular schedules in private homes and often in situations of dependency. Fear of relation in widespread. Domestic Workers Association play a crucial role, but they operate with limited resources. As one representative say, we don't want to be only testimonies. We want to be political subjects. And yeah, for finish, the conclusion, domestic and care work within private households is central to the Spanish care regime, but also the segment with the highest levels of precariousness and informality. It is a deeply feminized and migrant-led sector. Legal reforms since 2011 have been necessary and positive, but they address only one dimension of the problem. Structural barriers remain largely intact. To move towards effective formalization, labor law must be complemented by broader public policies. This should strengthen public care service, reduce social inequalities, reinforce labor inspection, support workers' collective organization, expand social dialogue, challenge cultural narratives, and reform immigration law. Only a multidimensional strategy can ensure decent work for domestic and care workers in Spain. This concludes our presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, but I think this sector is not very digitalized, suppose. Some question, Miranda, you want? Some comments? Well, I have to say you some information. We have, as you know, a web page. Let me a moment. What's the problem here? Can you see the web page of INSEAI?
Yes.
Yes. So.
Yes.
The window, in the window, you can see what is the problem here. One moment. Where you can see publication, the window of communication and dissemination, you can see publication, and this is the place for workshop proceedings. The workshop proceedings has ISBN, this is the number, and here is the place to publicate your papers. So, Raúl, I don't know how is the paper. We got all the papers exposed. No?
Hi, Campos. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So, well, we are talking Ana Viñas and me, and we have the papers, but we should to decide which output. But you, me, probably some people more, which output and is the all the papers should be published. It's not decided. I don't know. I can see an ISBN. I don't know if that is the well that's the workshop proceedings. Only the proceeding, no?
Yes.
So
I think
Ana Viñas is collecting and with me all the papers, and I think that Daniele Carusi is taking all in a folder.
Well, I think we had to make a deadline for the papers.
Yeah.
Maybe
yesterday came one more.
I think tomorrow all the papers are not right, are not ready. Maybe
probably we had 15, I think that 17.
Maybe the end of the month, November 30th, right?
Yes.
In that day, we edit all the paper and put it here. This is the last time for incorporate the paper to the work proceeding. Now the second information that we are working with an Scopus index magazine. Of course, this is not for all the paper, it's a select of paper, and I will tell you which is the name of the magazine. So, but it's a special issue about informality, maybe for 7 or 8 paper. And as you know, it's to blind review, then they select the paper. We inform you about this magazine, and you send the paper and they select. Here we incorporate all the paper. As you know, this proceeding it's not don't means that you are published the paper. The paper is published in a magazine, in a book, in one part of book. This is not a magazine. Is like a pre-paper, right? Then you can do with the paper what you want. Okay, send to a magazine, send the special issue which we are going to work, etc. And maybe you can do any other proposal for editing, for publish the paper of this workshop. Okay, we will continue tomorrow. If you don't any question, any comment. At 11 here, Niteroi time, Brazil time, and 3
p.m. in Spain, yes.
3 p.m. in Europe, okay?
Okay.
We will see you tomorrow.